Hi there, welcome. I'm Pamela and we're in my kitchen where I share with you some of my favorite recipes or those most requested by friends and family. Today we're going to be making Amanda Hesser's fruit tart. Amanda is a food writer, editor, and cookbook author, and I found this recipe about a month ago, and I've made it 6 or 7 times, shared it on social media, and I've had several friends try it and love it. Even people that do not consider themselves bakers have made it and enjoyed the process. So I want to share it with you today. It comes together really fast. What I love most about this recipe is you don't have to roll out the pie crust. I don't mind doing that. I've been making pie crust for years, but for those of you who dread the thought and want to go buy a crust, you just don't have to do that. So get yourself a bowl. And we're going to put our flour in the bowl and some salt and a little bit of sugar. And we're just going to whisk that together. You don't need to sift. The whisking does the trick. Now, we're going to add some ingredients to our flour. I've got 1/4 cup of butter and 1/4 cup of vegetable oil. I'm using mild olive oil and avocado oil. It's a blend. Amanda uses all oil. I like the flavor of butter, so I've just made a couple adjustments, but I will note when I write out the recipe exactly what she does and what I've done today. So we've got our butter and our oil, 2 tablespoons of milk. And please note, if I don't give you exact amounts on everything, it will be listed in the recipe underneath the video. We've got a 1/2 teaspoon of almond extract. Don't skip this. I suppose if you're allergic or you just don't like almond, you could put vanilla, but I think the almond gives it an incredible flavor. Okay, so you're just going to whisk this together a little bit. And we're going to pour it on top of our flour mixture. And you're going to take a fork and stir it around. Don't overwork it. You just want to absorb the dry ingredients. Going to get a crumbly mixture here. There. That looks good. I've got a tart pan. It's an 11-inch. Give or take an inch, you're fine. It doesn't have to be exact. And if you don't have a tart pan, you can use a cake pan. You could use a baking sheet. Amanda says she uses, in desperation, when she's other places and doesn't have her tart pan, she'll use one end of the baking sheet and use some aluminum foil to create the other side of the tart. So you can make this tart in anything. You do not need to have a tart pan. So what we're going to do is dump this in our tart pan. Oh, we're going to use this again, so I will keep that out. So we've got this crumbly mixture. I break up the big chunks. And then you're just going to press it in. I like to use my fingers like this. Don't dig your fingers in this way, or you will end up putting too many indentations into the crust. And we're just going to press it in, and we'll get a close-up of this so you can see this, what this looks like. You want the crust to be worked up the sides about a 1/2 inch is all. Now I can use the flat of my hand. And what you want to do is just fill in all the cracks so that your clumps all come together. And then you can go along the sides and press with either your finger or a knuckle so that it goes up the sides of the pan a little bit. If you use a very shallow tart pan, and your crust comes up too high, just cut off the extra crust. But I've never had that problem because my particular pan, I use this one all the time, and it's very tall. So as you can see, it's coming together. I've just pressed it in. There's no blind baking with this recipe. You do not have to put this in the oven and cook it first and then bring it out and add your toppings. We're just going to leave it just like this. It's not necessary to refrigerate it. Just there. I think that looks good. Now, I'm just going to set that aside. So now we're going to work on our crumble. This goes on top of the fruit. So before we lay the fruit in, I like to make the crumble so the fruit just doesn't sit on the crust and get it soggy. So we've got some sugar, a little bit of salt, and some flour. Now the recipe says 2 tablespoons of flour. If you are, I'm going to stir that with my fingers a little bit. If you are using very juicy peaches or berries, which is what I'm going to do today along with the peaches, I would recommend an extra tablespoon of flour. So 2 to 3 tablespoons. Now, I've got cold butter in my refrigerator. This is 2 tablespoons, and I'm just going to drop it in here, and I'm going to press it, squish it with my fingers, kind of like when you're making scones and you're working the butter in. So this takes about a minute, and I'm just squeezing the butter until I get a sandy texture, and it's going to go on top of our fruit. Now, what I put in here is a 1/2 cup of sugar. Amanda's recipe calls for 3/4 of a cup. I like to cut back on sugar when I can, especially since the fruit I have today is very sweet, and I just know I don't need that much. But if your fruit is not particularly sweet or very ripe, you might want to add that extra sugar. And, you know, I will tell you this, I've made this with frozen fruit before. And the only thing that I recommend is that you kind of let it thaw a little bit and drain off that watery, if they're icy, you know, your fruit. But other than that, it works just fine. I always add the extra tablespoon of flour when I'm using frozen fruit, because frozen fruit has more moisture. Okay, so this is my crumble. It looks like wet sand, and that's exactly what you want. Alrighty. So now we're going to pull our tart back in, and I've got a very large peach, and I'm going to slice it. Now, when Amanda, I'm pretty sure I mentioned, she makes a peach tart, or any stone fruit, she said. I really like to add berries, so that's what I'm going to do today. But if you were making the tart with just peaches, you'd probably need three large peaches. But what I do is I lay down the peaches first, and then I add my berries on top of it. And you're just going to go around in a circle around the tart pan. And in the middle, you can add the little odd pieces if you'd like, so you get a little peach in the middle. And they're overlapping a little bit. But like I said, I'm using other fruit today, so that's all the peaches that I'm going to use. If it was just a peach tart, then you would have 3 peaches and it would be more full. Okay, so I like to add strawberries. I cut them in quarters if they're big, halves if they're small. And when you scatter your fruit around, just find the holes where there's not a piece of fruit and drop a piece in there. I may not use all of this. There, I got enough there. Now I have some raspberries. There we go. And lastly, some blueberries. Scatter these around. Alrighty. Now, just going to take our crumble and drop it all over the top of the fruit. This is going to cook and bubble in the oven. The flour and the crumble will help the juices to thicken. And it cooks in the oven at 425 for 35 to 40 minutes. You just want to see that it's looking thick and bubbly. If it starts to look dark on the top, you could add a piece of aluminum foil just loosely over the top, but I've not really had to do that. So there is my tart. It's ready to go in the oven. I know this looks like the topping is rather heavy, but it just kind of melts and cooks in. So I'm going to bake this and then we will come back. Thanks. Our tart is out of the oven. It baked for about 40 minutes. I did want to mention, I did bake it on this round baking sheet. 2 reasons I do that. 1, to catch any drips. Also, I'm using a removable bottom tart pan, and sometimes when I've picked them up after filling them and transporting them to the oven, I'll put too much pressure underneath and kind of lift things up, and to prevent that, I just set the whole thing on a tray and then I move that tray to the oven. It works really well. Now, when you are getting ready to serve this, you want to loosen the edges up a little bit. Just take a dinner knife and just go around the little grooves and loosen it before you pop the tart out of the pan. The bottom that it is sitting on, I would leave it right there. Just take the sides off and lift the whole thing up and put it on a pretty serving plate if you're going to serve it that way. Otherwise, just cut the pieces in the kitchen and plate them. Now, something I did want to mention, my tart has a bit of crumbly topping on it that you can still see. That's because I used less sugar. If I had used all of the sugar that Amanda Hesser uses, it would have just melted in and you wouldn't actually see the topping. But because there was less butter and the butter and the flour didn't have as much sugar to cook in, you can still see the crumble. So if you use the full amount of sugar, your topping might look a little different when it's finished. Now, I am going to top this off with some whipping cream. And one of my upcoming videos, I'm going to show you how to make a fun and easy jar of whipping cream without dirtying a bowl and beaters and having to dig out your mixer. It's fun and easy. Now, this is too hot to plate. It's been out of the oven just a few minutes, and so I'm not going to cut it, which I know I usually do. But this is the tart. It is beautiful. It tastes amazing. I hope you try the recipe. If you do, leave me a comment. If you're enjoying my videos, give them a thumbs up and subscribe. And I will see you next time. Bye.